Picture this exact moment unfolding in a way that pulls you right into the heart of a family holiday turned battlefield, where the turkey sits golden and steaming on the table surrounded by aunts chattering endlessly about football scores and uncles nursing their beers with that familiar mix of holiday cheer and underlying tension. But beneath all that forced laughter and clinking glasses, I am sitting there with my fork gripped a little too tightly, knowing full well that one careless word from my own mother could unravel the entire facade I have so carefully constructed over years of biting my tongue while they fawned over my brother Alex as if he were the only one capable of achieving anything worthwhile in this life. And now as the mashed potatoes get passed around one more time amid the scent of sage and cranberry sauce wafting through the air, I can feel the atmosphere thickening like gravy about to boil over into something explosive, because tonight, after all these gatherings, filled with subtle digs and outright dismissals, I am finally done playing the role of the quiet failure who never quite measures up in the family photo album that everyone pretends is so perfect on the surface. I pulled up to the old Ramirez family house just as the November sun dipped low behind the row of maple trees lining the street in this quiet suburban corner of Chicago, casting those long, stretching shadows over the leaf-strewn driveway that looked exactly the same as it did when I was a kid racing bikes alongside Alex, without a care in the world beyond who could pedal faster to the corner store for candy. And at 42 years old now, with lines starting to form around my eyes from too many late nights hunched over my laptop, I still felt that same awkward pull of being the teenager who never quite fit into the mold whenever I returned to this place where neighbors waved from their porches with that polite Midwestern friendliness and the air carried hints of wood smoke mixed with the impending regret that always seemed to follow these holiday visits. My reliable but unassuming sedan crunched to a stop on the gravel, nothing flashy or attention-grabbing, because drawing eyes to my wheels would only invite more questions I had no interest in answering just yet. And I grabbed the store-bought pumpkin pie from the passenger seat that I had picked up from the little bakery on the way over, since showing up empty-handed to Mom's Thanksgiving spread was basically considered a cardinal sin in our household traditions passed down from her own Mexican immigrant parents who had always emphasized the importance of contributing to the communal table, no matter how small the offering might seem. Deep down in the core of my being, I knew without a shadow of doubt that this particular dinner was going to unfold like a minefield carefully laid out with emotional tripwires, the kind where one misplaced word or glance could detonate years' worth of buried grudges and resentments that had been simmering since Alex and I were growing up under the same roof with parents who worked double shifts at the factory just to keep the lights on and food on the table. But I had chosen to come anyway, armed not with arguments or raised voices, but with a composed smile that concealed layers of achievements and secrets far more potent than any outburst could ever hope to be. Stepping through the front door into the immediate warmth of the living room felt like receiving a hug from an old acquaintance who secretly carried judgments in their back pocket. The space already buzzing with the energy of cousins laughing uproariously over some ridiculous viral video playing on their smartphones while Uncle Raoul held court from his worn recliner, recounting the same embellished stories about his glory days fixing cars at the local auto shop, as if each retelling added fresh layers of heroism to his past. Mom spotted me the instant I crossed the threshold, her face lighting up in that automatic way that made me question whether it stemmed from genuine joy at seeing her daughter or simply the programmed autopilot of holiday hosting duties she had perfected over decades of these gatherings. And she bustled over with open arms, calling out, "Elena, Mija, you made it just in time. Come on back to the kitchen right now, because Alex and Carla have just arrived with the kids, who are already running wild like little hurricanes tearing through the house." Carla, Alex's wife of 15 solid years and the epitome of suburban perfection, with her carefully highlighted hair and arms toned from endless yoga classes at the community center, gave me a quick wave over the chaos of their two boys who were darting between legs and knocking over stacks of napkins, while Alex himself clapped me firmly on the back with a force that carried just a hint of condescension hidden behind his broad grin full of straight white teeth and unshakable confidence. Hey sis, it's been too long. You still out there slinging those designs from whatever coffee shop desk you can snag these days? He asked in that casual tone that always managed to underscore how little he thought of my career path. And I let out a light chuckle to keep things smooth on the surface, because launching into a defense right there in the entryway would have spoiled the carefully balanced tension I was nurturing. For later, even though the truth was that I had long since moved beyond scraping by in cafes to building a thriving freelance graphic design business with clients who trusted me with major branding projects for companies across the Midwest. We had all grown up right here in this very house with its creaky wooden floors and walls adorned with faded family photos capturing birthdays and graduations, where Alex always stood a little taller and prouder in the center of the frame. Our parents' mom and dad scraping together every penny from their factory jobs to instill in us the value of hard work while quietly whispering among themselves that Alex, with his business degree from the state university and his natural charisma for sales, would be the one to lift the family name into some semblance of success. Whereas I, the artsy dreamer who had dropped out of community college after just 2 semesters to chase after graphic design gigs that paid barely enough for rent and ramen noodles, was seen more as a risky bet than a sure thing. They were not entirely wrong in those early days, because I did bounce from one cramped apartment to the next even crappier one while dodging mom's heavy sighs over the phone and Alex's smirking comments during rare visits about how I needed to get a real job. All of that happening while he steadily climbed the corporate ladder at his insurance firm downtown, complete with expense account lunches and team-building retreats that sounded more like vacations to the rest of us. But everything shifted dramatically about 5 years ago when I decided to go fully independent, striking out on my own to build a portfolio that unexpectedly caught the attention of influential clients in the tech and marketing worlds, leading to steady contracts and income streams that allowed me to stash away savings towards something substantial without a single soul in this family catching wind of the transformation, because why would I broadcast my wins to an audience that had spent years betting against me and underestimating every step I took? Still, I allowed them to cling to their outdated image of me as the struggling artist forever treading water in a sea of uncertainty, because nothing quite matches the quiet satisfaction of being underestimated by those who should know you best, turning their doubts into the fuel that propelled me forward into a life they could scarcely imagine. As I placed the pumpkin pie carefully on the cluttered kitchen counter amid the array of half-chopped vegetables and bubbling pots on the stove, Mom pulled me aside with her apron still dusted in flour and her eyes narrowing into that familiar blend of maternal concern laced with unmistakable disappointment that had become her default expression whenever the topic of my life choices came up during these visits. "Elena, when are you finally going to settle down and build something stable like your brother has with his family and his career? You are not getting any younger in this fast-moving world, and time has a way of slipping through your fingers if you do not grab hold of it," she said in that earnest tone that carried the weight of her own unfulfilled dreams from arriving in America as a young woman with big hopes, but settling into the routines of factory life and family obligations, and I nodded, along swallowing the sharp retort that threatened to rise in my throat, because engaging in one of our classic arguments right then would have been as futile and exhausting as trying to wrestle fog into submission on a damp Chicago morning. Instead, I threw myself into helping with the final preparations, mashing the potatoes with vigorous strokes of the masher, while listening to the overlapping chatter filtering in from the dining room, where stories of Alex's most recent promotion at work and the kids' impressive soccer trophies from the fall season, and even Carla's budding recipe blog that she claimed was on the verge of taking off, dominated the conversation, like they always did during these holidays. It was all so meticulously picture-perfect, the kind of glossy American dream snapshot that graced holiday cards and social media feeds, making everyone temporarily forget about the hairline cracks running beneath the surface of mortgages and job insecurities and the quiet pressures of keeping up appearances in a neighborhood where the houses all looked alike, but the stories inside varied wildly from triumph to quiet desperation. The afternoon dragged on in that whirlwind fashion typical of Thanksgiving preparations, with the kitchen transforming into a bustling command center of clanging pots and half-hearted jokes exchanged over steaming dishes, while Uncle Raoul wandered in periodically, to snag another beer from the fridge and rib me good-naturedly about my so-called bohemian lifestyle, evident in my simple jeans and sweater ensemble that actually concealed a designer watch I had splurged on just last month as a private reward for hitting a major client milestone. You artists are always one heartbeat away from the street corner sketching for tips instead of building something real. He laughed with that booming voice that filled the small space and echoed off the tiled walls. And I fired back, without missing a beat, in a grin that masked the edge of truth in his words. Better to be out there chasing the wind than stuck idling in the same spot forever, uncle, because at least it keeps the blood flowing hot and alive instead of cooling into regret, which made him roar with approval even as Mom shot me one of her signature looks that silently accused me of being difficult and uncooperative as always when faced with the family's well-meaning but misguided advice. By the time we began carrying the heavy platters of food out to the dining room table, the sun had fully set outside, painting the windows with inky blackness, and the room inside glowed warmly under the old chandelier that Dad had proudly hung himself in the garage one weekend before his heart gave out 5 years ago, leaving behind a void that these gatherings both honored and highlighted with every shared memory. Everyone settled into their assigned seats around the long oak table that had hosted countless holidays. Grace was murmured with extra emphasis on giving thanks for the bountiful year, despite the economic whispers that lingered in the background, and as the turkey was meticulously carved into juicy slices, I caught Alex's eye. From across the way where he sat at the head like he owned the place, his expression carrying that smug assurance that came so naturally to him after years of being the favored son. Something deep inside me twisted in response, not quite anger in the explosive sense, but a steady, quiet resolve that had been building like pressure in a sealed pot ready to release at the precise moment, and little did anyone at that table suspect that the real main course of the evening would be the words I had been holding back, served up cold and calculated to shift the entire dynamic in ways that would linger long after the leftovers were wrapped and the dishes washed. Then, as if on cue, Mom leaned forward across the table with her fork already poised eagerly over her plate and let the comment slip out in that offhand manner she often used to mask deeper intentions. Your brother just bought a beautiful home up in Evanston with 4 bedrooms and all the modern touches you could dream of. When will you finally do the same and get your life together, Elena? Because opportunities like that do not come around every day in this economy. The room fell into a sudden hush, with all eyes flicking toward me in anticipation of the usual deflection or awkward laugh, and I felt that familiar old rage ignite hot and unyielding in my chest as I picked up my own fork and met her gaze directly with a smile that carried the promise of revelations yet to come, turning the night into something far more memorable than any traditional Thanksgiving toast. Mom's words lingered in the air like the stubborn smoke from one of Uncle Raoul's after-dinner cigars that always managed to seep into every corner of the house, despite the open windows and fans whirring overhead, creating an atmosphere thick and impossible to wave away as the entire table seemed to pause mid-bite, with forks hovering uncertainly over plates piled high with the remnants of turkey and stuffing, while eyes darted between her innocent expression and my own face that I kept composed under the weight of that familiar sting from being measured against Alex, yet again in this endless cycle of family comparisons that had defined so many holidays before this one. I held on to that practiced smile, curving my lips just enough to suggest everything was fine on the surface, even as my mind whirled through a dozen potential comebacks, each one sharper than the edge of the carving knife still resting on the platter nearby. Because unloading the full truth right then in the midst of passing the gravy boat would have robbed the moment of its carefully built tension and diminished the satisfaction of letting the revelation unfold at a pace that maximized the impact on everyone who had spent years underestimating my path forward. Confusion began to ripple across the faces around the table, starting with Uncle Raoul, whose bushy eyebrows climbed high in surprise, while Carlo whispered something quick and low to Alex that caused his jaw to tighten ever so slightly in a way that betrayed the confidence he usually projected so effortlessly, and Mom herself blinked rapidly as if trying to process whether her comment had landed as intended or sparked something unexpected in the daughter she had always viewed through the lens of concern mixed with quiet disappointment over choices that diverged from the more traditional routes her own life had followed. We had barely dug into the main course when the real undercurrents of the afternoon started to reveal themselves earlier that very day shortly after I had arrived, and the initial greetings had settled into the routine bustle of pre-dinner activities. Because while Mom fussed endlessly over the stuffing in the kitchen with its aromas of sage and onions filling the space, I had slipped out to the backyard for a moment of fresh air to clear my head from the immediate onslaught of family energy that always felt overwhelming upon re-entry. The crisp November wind whipped through the skeletal branches of the old oaks lining our backyard fence, carrying with it the faint sounds of neighborhood kids shouting in the distance as they played football on a nearby lawn. And that was precisely when I overheard Alex on his cell phone pacing back and forth across the cracked concrete patio like a man trying to assert ownership over territory that might slip away at any moment, his voice pitched low but carrying clearly on the breeze that rustled the fallen leaves around my feet. Yeah, the closing on the house is set for next week, but these interest rates are killing us, babe. It's going to be tighter than we thought, with the payments stretching our budget in ways I didn't anticipate, he had said to Carla in that hushed tone laced with underlying stress that contrasted sharply with the boastful stories he would share later at the table. And I ducked quickly behind the weathered shed at the edge of the yard, my heart pounding, not from any sense of guilt over eavesdropping, but from the sheer delicious irony of discovering that the family golden child, the one Mom praised at every opportunity as the picture of stability and success, was actually sweating over his so-called dream home, while I had already secured my own slice of security without a single word of fanfare or warning to anyone in this circle. That snippet of conversation served as the first real crack in his otherwise polished facade, a subtle clue that made my own hidden accomplishments feel even more validating and sweet, like stumbling upon an unexpected windfall in the midst of what everyone assumed was ongoing struggle for me alone. Back inside the house, the living room had transformed into a lively reunion hall where cousins Maria and Luis traded animated stories about their teenagers navigating college applications and the latest disappointing loss by the Chicago Bears that had the whole group groaning in shared sports fandom misery, and I perched casually on the arm of the sagging couch nursing a glass of red wine that Mom had poured a bit too generously, as was her habit during these events, while listening to Alex command the room's attention with tales of his impending big move to Evanston that he described in glowing terms, complete with details about the spacious kitchen where Carla could expand her recipe experiments and the proximity to the lake that promised weekend escapes from city hustle. The place has this incredible layout with room for a home office that will make remote workdays feel like a luxury instead of a grind, he declared with that salesman charisma he had honed over years at the insurance firm, drawing oohs and ahs from the assembled relatives as if he had single-handedly conquered the real estate market in a city known for its cutthroat competition. And I bit down on the inside of my cheek to suppress the urge to point out the vulnerabilities I had just overheard, opting instead for a dash of humor to insert myself without escalating too soon. Sounds downright fancy, Alex. Hope it comes equipped with a personal chef, because from what I remember your kitchen skills peaked at boiling hot dogs without burning the pot, which was always more luck than talent. I quipped lightly enough to elicit ripples of laughter around the room, even from Carla, who swatted his arm in playful solidarity, but not so softly that Alex's smile did not tighten just a fraction at the corners, revealing the subtle sting of my first small jab landing precisely where intended, as a taste of the witty revenge I had been cultivating in quiet moments away from their judgments. As the afternoon wore on into the golden hours before sunset, Mom took charge of corralling all of us into helping set the long dining table with its starched white cloth and mismatched china passed down through generations, her comments slicing through the casual chatter like festive ribbons tied too tightly around unspoken expectations whenever the conversation circled back to life milestones and achievements. Alex has always shown such drive and foresight. Look at where it has taken him now, with a growing family and a solid home to anchor everything, while you, Elena, could stand to learn a thing or two about channeling that artistic energy into something more tangible and secure in the long run, she remarked while arranging the silverware with precise movements born from years of hosting these events, and I rolled my eyes, internally stacking the heavy plates with a bit more force than necessary as memories flooded back of the countless nights I had crashed on friends' worn couches after Freelance gigs fell through or paid pennies, leaving me scraping by while Alex jetted off to corporate conferences on the company's dime, surrounded by perks that seemed worlds away from my reality at the time. But those days were firmly in the past because my freelance world had evolved into a robust operation with logos and branding projects for national companies that not only covered the bills, but built a substantial nest egg, leading me to purchase a sleek condo downtown overlooking the bustling streets and shimmering lights of the city, all without the fanfare of family announcements or celebratory toasts, since sharing such milestones with doubters felt like handing them ammunition to minimize or question the journey that got me there. Hearing Mom's familiar digs in that moment only reinforced the armor of my secrecy, making it feel less like isolation and more like a strategic choice to protect the victories earned through solitary determination against the backdrop of their persistent underestimation. Dinner finally commenced with the clinking of silverware, establishing a rhythmic backdrop to the escalating undercurrents of barbs and boasts as platters made their rounds and wine glasses were refilled to ease the holiday pleasantries along. And Uncle Raoul launched into one of his epic tales about his own house-hunting adventures back in the turbulent 80s, when inflation turned every deal into a high-stakes gamble, drawing nods of recognition from the older generation who remembered all too well when buying a home cost about what a decent car does today in this inflated market. I chimed in with a lighthearted laugh to keep the energy flowing. Yeah, Uncle, those were the days before apps turned real estate into a feeding frenzy with sharks circling every listing, but at least you did not have to outbid flippers with deep pockets just to get a foot in the door, which garnered a few chuckles and momentarily diffused the building tension until Alex leaned forward across the table, his eyes gleaming with that competitive spark. Speaking of which, our new place features a state-of-the-art home office setup that will revolutionize how I handle work. Sis, it might even inspire you to level up from those coffee shop sketches to something more permanent, he said with the gall that came from years of dismissing my profession as little more than a hobby, unstable and unworthy of serious investment. And I felt a fresh wave of heat rise in my chest, but played it cool by forking a tart cranberry sauce that mirrored the sharpness of my unspoken thoughts, refusing to let him bait me into an early reveal. The meal progressed in fits and starts, with plates filling and emptying amid the warmth of shared stories, when Mom suddenly raised her glass high for the traditional toast, her voice carrying across the table with authority. To our family and to Alex's exciting new chapter with that beautiful home in Evanston, may it bring prosperity and joy to all of us as we each find our way forward in this unpredictable life. Cheers echoed around the room, glasses clinking in unison, but as Mom's gaze settled expectantly on me after her words, the room quieted into an anticipatory hush, waiting for my customary nod of agreement. Yet something deep inside me finally snapped. Under the accumulated weight of all those simmering resentments boiling over like an unattended pot on the stove, and I set my glass down deliberately slow, feeling the press of unspoken truths demanding release, knowing full well that her next probing question could very well push me straight over the edge into the confrontation I had been orchestrating all evening long. Toasts wrapped up amid the usual flurry of hugs and hearty backslaps that echoed through the dining room like punctuation marks on the holiday script we all knew by heart, but Mom's pointed add-on about my path lingered stubbornly in the air, much like the aftertaste of those overcooked yams she insisted on making every year, sweet and cloying on the surface, yet leaving a bitter undertone that clung to the back of your throat long after the meal should have ended, and I could practically see the questions forming in the eyes of everyone around the table, from Uncle Raoul's raised eyebrows to Maria's curious tilt of the head, as they all waited for me to deflect with my standard awkward laugh or vague assurance that things were fine, even though deep down the pressure was building like steam in a sealed pressure cooker, ready to force its way out at the slightest provocation. Cousin Maria, ever the social connector with her realtor's instinct for sniffing out potential deals, leaned across the table first, her voice dropping into that conspiratorial tone she reserved for neighborhood gossip, while her badge pinned to her sweater caught the light from the chandelier overhead. So Elena, spill the beans on your own holiday plans. Are you still hunkered down in that cozy Wicker Park apartment, or have you got something brewing in this wild real estate market that has everyone scrambling for scraps? I shrugged with deliberate nonchalance, spearing a stray green bean on my plate to buy a precious second of composure, because admitting even a sliver of the truth right then would have been like spoiling the carefully timed punchline of a joke I had been setting up for months, if not years, and instead, I opted for a light quip to keep the waters calm. Holiday plans for me usually boil down to surviving feasts like this one, without needing a nap right after the turkey hits the table, though I suppose that's more achievement than most manage around here, which earned a smattering of laughs that rippled through the group, cutting through the awkwardness for a brief moment, but doing little to ease the internal pressure that mounted with every glance thrown my way, as if I were some unfinished puzzle piece in the family portrait they all assumed fit neatly into place. The dining table stretched out before us like a battlefield strewn with the half-eaten remnants of sides and warming glasses of wine that caught the warm glow of the overhead chandelier, casting soft shadows on faces already flushed from the kitchen heat and the easy flow of stories that masked deeper tensions bubbling just beneath the surface, while Uncle Raoul dove into his second helping with gusto, launching into a heartfelt recounting of Thanksgivings from decades past when Dad would sneak extra slices of pie to the kids under the table, his booming voice rising above the distant chatter of the boys in the living room as they wrestled over the remote for cartoon control. Beneath all that nostalgic warmth, however, the undercurrents swirled relentlessly, with Alex stealing furtive glances at his phone every few minutes, its screen lighting up with notifications that he dismissed too quickly, and Carla whispering urgent asides to him that drew faint frowns across his usually confident brow, while Mom watched me with that piercing maternal gaze, as if trying to decipher the layers I had wrapped around my life choices that had always set me apart from the more straightforward path Alex had trodden so effortlessly in her eyes. I had carved out my niche as the odd one from the start, the girl who filled notebooks with sketches and color palettes, while Alex mastered sales pitches and networking events in college, their doubts serving as the invisible fuel that propelled me through the lean years of scraping by on freelance scraps until a single logo design for a budding tech startup went unexpectedly viral, catching the eye of bigger players and transforming my operation into a steady stream of high-paying contracts that funded not just survival but actual growth toward the kind of stability they preached about without ever extending the same faith in my direction. Yet there I sat amid the clatter of silverware and the scent of cooling gravy, allowing them to maintain their outdated narrative of me as the perpetual dreamer forever on the cusp of breakthrough, because the true revenge lay not in confrontation, but in the strategic reveal designed to shatter their assumptions at the moment of maximum impact, turning years of quiet achievement into a spotlight they could not ignore. Halfway through the meal, as conversations naturally drifted toward the latest neighborhood scandals like the Johnsons' messy divorce that had tongues wagging for weeks and the sudden closure of the beloved corner coffee shop that had been a staple for morning lattes, Maria leaned in closer across the table, her eyes sparkling with genuine interest born from spotting one of my public Instagram posts earlier that week, a subtle clue to my professional world that I had intended to keep more contained, but now threatened to unravel the secrecy prematurely. Elena, I have to say, I scrolled through your feed the other day, and those graphic designs you are posting are absolutely killer. With such a sharp eye for composition, you should seriously consider branching into something like staging homes for sales, because your visuals could make any listing pop in this competitive market, she enthused, waving her fork for emphasis, and my stomach did a quick flip at the realization that she had glimpsed the portfolio side of my life, the one showcasing work for national brands that had quietly built my reputation far beyond the coffee shop gigs they imagined. Alex perked up immediately, his fork pausing midair as he zeroed in on the exchange with that competitive glint in his eye. Instagram posts, since when do you bother with that social media stuff, sis? I thought you were too busy hustling for the next paycheck to play around online, he remarked in a tone that dripped with casual dismissal, masking the underlying surprise that I might have a digital footprint worth noticing, and I waved it off with a grin that hid the rush of adrenaline turning what could have been an awkward exposure into an opportunity for my next layer of witty counterplay. Oh, just some harmless doodles to fend off the wolves at the door, unlike certain folks who apparently need an entire house just to feel like they have arrived somewhere substantial, I shot back smoothly enough to send the table into an eruption of chuckles with even Carla covering her mouth to stifle a laugh, while Alex's face colored a shade deeper, the subtle sting of my retort landing like a well-aimed dart in the midst of his self-assured territory, but Mom's brow furrowed, noticeably sensing the sharper edge, creeping into the banter that had always danced on the line between teasing and truth during these family meals. The atmosphere in the room thickened palpably as plates began to clear just a bit, with the kids finally excused to the living room for slices of pie and episodes of animated adventures that provided a welcome buffer from the adult conversations turning toward the more probing territory of life reflections and future plans, while the older generation, like Uncle Raoul, steered the talk toward broader economic woes, reminiscing about how skyrocketing prices echoed the challenges of his youth, and Alex jumped in defensively to champion his recent purchase as a beacon of smart planning. It's all about building equity in the long game, while rents keep climbing and swallowing people whole. Our new place in Evanston positions us perfectly for whatever comes next, with great schools and lake access that adds real value, he explained with the fervor of someone convincing himself as much as the audience, and it struck me as almost noble on the surface until I recalled the strained phone call from the patio revealing the shaky foundations beneath his dream, the kind of financial tightrope that mirrored my own early struggles, but without the buffer of secrecy I had maintained so effectively. I stayed mostly silent during his monologue, letting him bask in the nods of approval until Mom inevitably swung the conversation back toward me, her voice carrying that blend of encouragement and critique she wielded so masterfully. See, Elena, that is what real stability looks like. Your brother has the drive to make it happen, and you have so much talent buried in those designs. But when are you going to channel it into something solid like a home or a family instead of floating from one idea to the next in this uncertain world? Her words landed with the precision of a well-practiced jab, casual in delivery, but cutting deep into the accumulated hurts of years spent justifying my choices to a family that measured success by conventional yardsticks, and the entire room went still. In that moment, forks hovering midway to mouths, eyes locking onto me as if bracing for the crack in my usual composure that they half expected and half hoped would not come. I felt the breaking point arrive like a wave cresting after building relentlessly against the shore, that instant where resentment hardens into decisive action, my pulse steady and focused as I lifted my gaze to meet hers directly across the laden table, refusing to let the weight of their expectations pull me under any longer, while the laughter from the living room faded into a distant hum, underscoring the intimacy of the standoff unfolding right there amid the crumbs and candlelight. In that suspended breath before the next word could escape her lips, her fork trembled ever so slightly in her grasp, betraying the uncertainty flickering behind her confident facade, and then she pressed forward with the line that sealed the moment, her voice infused with a mix of love, pity, and unyielding expectation. Your brother just bought a beautiful home up in Evanston, the kind with 4 bedrooms and space for everyone to grow. When will you finally do the same and step up, Elena? Because life does not wait for dreams to catch up. The utensil slipped from her fingers, clattering softly against the edge of her plate in a sound that reverberated through the hushed space, and every head in the room swiveled toward me, the silence charged with electric anticipation of accusations and defenses yet to unfold as I allowed my smile to widen imperceptibly, the words of my long-held secret rising to the surface, ready to turn the entire table, not just figuratively, but in a way that would echo through the rest of the night and beyond, into the uncertain aftermath of truths laid bare. Her fork struck the plate with a dull metallic ting that resonated far louder than its actual volume in the abruptly hushed dining room, where the air hung heavy with the mingled scents of cooling turkey drippings and spiced cranberry remnants, while every set of eyes around the table, from Mom's widening with a mix of shock and dawning confusion to Alex's narrowing in defensive scrutiny and Maria's sparkling with the thrill of unfolding drama, locked onto me as if I had just ignited a fuse, leading straight to some long-buried family explosion that no one had anticipated, amid the holiday trimmings and flickering candlelight casting elongated shadows across the white tablecloth. I maintained that smile I had rehearsed countless times in the quiet solitude of my car rides home from client meetings, the one that conveyed calm assurance without a hint of the storm raging internally, because in that suspended heartbeat I savored the subtle shift in power dynamics, where the undercurrent of their Collective underestimation began to recede like a tide pulling back before a wave, and I spoke the words with a steady casualness that belied the years of preparation behind them. I did already, Mom. The place is all mine now, complete with every comfort I could want, overlooking the city lights that make even the grayest days feel alive. The revelation dropped into the silence like a stone into still water, sending ripples of disbelief across faces that had spent so long painting me as the perpetual straggler in the race of life, and for a lingering beat no one stirred the weight of my admission, hanging there unadorned, forcing them to confront the possibility that their assumptions about my trajectory had been not just misguided, but profoundly off the mark in ways that would demand a reckoning right there amid the scattered breadcrumbs and half-empty wine glasses. Confusion swept through the group in visible waves, starting with Uncle Raoul, whose bushy eyebrows shot upward in genuine surprise as he set down his own utensil to lean forward with a gruff chuckle that broke the ice just a fraction, while Carla murmured something low and urgent to Alex, prompting his jaw to clench in a manner that revealed the cracks in his usual poise, and Mom herself placed a fluttering hand against her chest, as if my words had physically struck her, the blend of hurt, surprise, and reluctant curiosity etching lines across her forehead that spoke volumes about the maternal instincts she had wielded for decades, now turned inward for reevaluation. I had orchestrated this partial unveiling without unleashing the full torrent of details, leaving them dangling on the hook of intrigue, which was the essence of the revenge I sought, not through cruelty or raised voices, but through the clever layering of truths that compelled them to question their own narratives and chase after the fragments I doled out sparingly, like a storyteller rationing plot twists to heighten the suspense. What exactly do you mean by that, Mija? Are you saying you bought a home without telling any of us, your family, who have always been here for you through thick and thin, even when things looked uncertain? Mom stammered, her voice threading the needle between accusation and plea, and I leaned back slightly in my chair, reaching for a leftover dinner roll to tear into small pieces as a way to ground myself in the moment, before responding with measured clarity. I mean precisely what I said. The guest list for celebrations in my new space stays short, limited to those who have actually rooted for me along the way, instead of second-guessing every milestone or dismissing the grind as some fleeting phase that would never lead anywhere substantial. The barrage of questions erupted then in a softened cascade, tempered by the lingering holiday haze, but laced with an undercurrent of sharpness that pulled everyone deeper into the web of revelations I was weaving, while the distant sounds of the kids' laughter from the living room provided an ironic counterpoint to the adult tensions unfolding at the table. Alex recovered his composure, first slipping back into the salesman mode he had perfected over years of closing deals at the insurance firm, his tone aiming for brotherly camaraderie laced with defensiveness. Come on, Elena, that is not entirely fair. We have supported you in our own ways, just trying to be realistic about the risks in your line of work without wanting to see you end up regretting choices down the road like so many do in this economy. Realistic, the word ignited a spark of old resentment within me, echoing the countless times he had patted my efforts on the head like a child's hobby while I poured endless hours into building a freelance empire from the ground up, starting with those early gigs that barely covered bus fare, but evolving through persistence into contracts with major brands that funded the down payment on a sleek downtown condo with modern lines and a balcony where I could watch the lake shimmer on clear nights, all achieved without the safety net of family loans or advice that would have come bundled with their judgments. Before I could formulate a direct retort, Maria interjected with her characteristic enthusiasm as the self-appointed bridge builder in family dynamics. Hold on, everyone, I am not letting this slide. Elena, those designs I saw on your Instagram earlier, they scream professional success. With that kind of talent, no wonder you pulled off something big. Now give us the details. Where is this mystery home of yours, and what does it look like? Because I bet it is as stylish as your portfolio suggests. I let out a soft chuckle to infuse the moment with a touch of the humor that had always served as my shield in these gatherings, lightening the mood without fully dissipating the edge, and turning the potential confrontation into another opportunity for subtle payback. It is no sprawling Evanston mansion with room for a small army, but it certainly beats the alternative of crashing on park benches, which is about what you all seem to envision for my future back when I was hustling through the lean years without a safety net. which prompted an uneasy wave of laughter to circulate around the table, with Carla even joining in as she swatted Alex's arm in mock solidarity, though his expression remained taut, betraying the personal sting of being indirectly called out on his own facade of perfection. As slices of the pumpkin pie I had brought were passed around amid murmurs of appreciation for the flaky crust and spiced filling that provided a brief interlude of normalcy, the emotional dilemma deepened, ensnaring the entire group in a tangle of curiosity and confession, while Mom persisted gently, her fork now entirely forgotten on her plate. "But why keep something so monumental hidden from us, Elena? We are your family, bound by blood and shared history through all the ups and downs that come with it." Family, the invocation, carried the weight of obligations and expectations that had justified years of side glances and sighs over my unconventional path, and for the first time that evening a faint pang pierced my armor of resolve, making me question in the quiet recesses of my mind whether this calculated secrecy had empowered me or merely deepened the isolation that came with proving points at the expense of connection. Still, I held my ground, dropping another deliberate clue to sustain the anticipation without granting full closure. Believing in my own vision had to come first before extending invitations to those whose cheers were always conditional on fitting the mold. Now that I have savored the independence it brings, the door might crack open for doubters if they approach with genuine interest rather than preconceived notions, and Uncle Raoul nodded along with a rumbling approval, muttering something about the younger generation standing tall against outdated pressures that resonated with his own stories of bootstrapping in tougher times. Alex, however, refused to let the moment pass unchallenged, his voice rising with a challenge that masked vulnerability. "If it is all as real as you claim, then prove it, Elena. Pull up some photos or details right here, so we can see what you have built instead of leaving us guessing like this." And the irony of his demand twisted sharply within me, especially in light of the strained patio conversation I had overheard earlier about his mortgage rates climbing and payments stretching thin, a twist that humanized his boasts while underscoring the fragility of the stability he touted so proudly. The evening balanced precariously on that razor edge, with conversations splintering into smaller clusters as the kids burst back into the fray, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around adult revelations, and Carla drew me aside near the kitchen doorway. Her expression softened with empathy. "He is really stressed about the house closing. Do not hit too hard tonight. It is supposed to be a day of thanks after all," which complicated my sense of righteous revenge by revealing the human frailties behind his armor and prompting a flicker of doubt about whether my witty barbs served justice or merely perpetuated cycles of misunderstanding. Rejoining the group, I seized the opportunity to deliver a sharp yet satisfying comeback that stunned the room into a mix of gasps and reluctant chuckles. "Hitting hard, that is not my style, Carla. I am just polishing my own achievements until they shine, while from this vantage point yours seem a tad scuffed around the edges, needing more than a quick buff to restore the glow." The words landing with the precision of a well-honed retort, witty enough to elicit uneasy laughter, but pointed enough to leave Alex flushed and the atmosphere buzzing with unresolved energy that promised further fallout. Just as the collective tension reached its peak, my phone vibrated insistently in the pocket of my jeans, a summons from an unexpected source that I glanced at briefly, the screen illuminating with a contact name tied to complications far beyond this dinner table. And I excused myself to the dimly lit hallway, stepping away from the prying eyes that followed my every move with heightened curiosity. Answering in hushed tones, the voice on the other end delivered news that twisted the evening's trajectory into uncharted territory, a shocking development involving a long-dormant family secret resurfacing at the worst possible moment and leaving me frozen against the wall, heart racing as I processed the implications, wondering if my meticulously planned unveiling was on the verge of unraveling in ways that no amount of clever revenge could have foreseen. The voice crackling through the phone belonged to my realtor, Elena's colleague from a firm across town, her tone laced with that professional urgency blended with genuine excitement over closing deals that made her job feel like more than just paperwork and handshakes. "Elena, the offer on your old Wicker Park apartment just came in, full asking price, no contingencies, and we can push for closing next month, which lines up perfectly with your upgrade to that stunning downtown condo overlooking the lake, a real steal in this market that has buyers scrambling for anything with a view and stability these days." I pressed my back against the cool wallpaper of the dimly lit hallway just beyond the dining room's glow, where the murmurs of my family continued in fragmented waves of speculation, and surprised the words sinking into me like the final interlocking piece of a mosaic I had assembled in secrecy over years of late-night negotiations and quiet triumphs that no one at that table could have anticipated, transforming what started as survival freelancing into a portfolio of high-profile branding contracts, funding not just the sale of my starter place, but the purchase of a two-bedroom haven with sleek modern lines, a dedicated studio for my designs, and a balcony where I could sip coffee, watching the Chicago skyline emerge from morning fog, all achieved without the fanfare of family consultations or celebratory calls, because sharing such milestones with those who had doubted every sketch and pitch felt like inviting critics to a victory lap they had never earned. Hearing confirmation, now mere steps from the heart of the family drama, cracked open the suspense I had so meticulously maintained, forcing a crossroads in my mind about how much of this layered truth to unleash before the evening dissolved into chaos that might eclipse even the pointed satisfaction of my initial reveal. I slipped the phone back into my pocket with a nod to myself, composing my features into that same assured smile before re-entering the dining room, where the atmosphere had thickened into a tapestry of unresolved questions, with Mom's eyes searching mine for answers, Alex fidgeting with the edge of his napkin in a rare display of unease, and even the kids sensing the shift as they quieted their pie-fueled energy to watch the adults navigate the unfolding tension like characters in one of their cartoons facing a plot twist. "Everything all right out there, Elena? You look like you just heard from the ghost of holidays past." Carla ventured with her peacemaker's intuition, always tuned to smoothing ruffled feathers, and I eased back into my seat across from the half-cleared table, the remnants of the feast providing a grounded anchor amid the emotional swells. Better than all right, actually. That call was about finalizing things on my place, the one I mentioned earlier, turning what was a whisper of possibility into solid reality right here on this night of supposed thanks and gatherings. Gasps threaded through the group like sparks igniting dry tinder, and Mom leaned forward, her voice trembling with a cocktail of pride, hurt, and the dawning realization that her daughter's path had diverged far beyond the visible horizon. "You truly went through with it all on your own, without a single word to us, your blood family, who have weathered storms together since you were little girls chasing fireflies in the backyard. Mija, how could you keep something so life-changing locked away like a secret vault?" I nodded, allowing the details to flow in controlled bursts, painting vivid strokes of the condo's essence, from the open-concept kitchen with its quartz counters perfect for late-night brainstorming sessions to the home office bathed in natural light where I had sealed deals with clients spanning coasts, all without the safety net of parental loans or sibling advice that would have inevitably come wrapped in layers of unsolicited opinions and comparisons to Alex's more conventional climb. No open house fanfare, no invites to the closing, because the seats at that metaphorical table belonged to the mentors and online communities who had believed in my vision when family gatherings echoed with sighs over my unstable choices, turning isolation into a forge for resilience that now gleamed in the form of equity and independence, hard-won against the backdrop of economic pressures that squeezed everyone from millennials like me to the boomers reminiscing about cheaper homes and steadier jobs. The reveal cascaded outward, then emotions crashing in unpredictable waves across the table, with Alex's face paling as his earlier boasts about Evanston's grandeur crumbled under the weight of my understated success, his voice emerging strained and probing. "How did you even pull that off, Elena? I mean, congrats, but seriously, the secrecy, the way you built it all under the radar without leaning on anyone, it is almost like you were waiting for this exact moment to drop the bomb and watch us scramble." And the why of it all hung palpably, pulling reluctant confessions from the fray as Carla admitted in a hushed aside that their house hunt had unraveled into a scramble, with interest rates devouring half of Alex's bonus and payments looming like storm clouds, a twist that echoed my own hidden battles, but stripped of the solitude I had chosen, casting ironic light on the stability he had touted as unassailable. Mom's eyes welled with unshed tears, a complex brew of maternal joy clashing against the pain of exclusion, her hand reaching across the table to grasp mine in a gesture that bridged decades of guidance, both nurturing and narrowing. We only ever wanted you safe and rooted, Mija, not to clip your wings, but to protect you from the falls we saw coming in your risky pursuits, never realizing you were already flying higher than we could see from down here in our worries. Safe, the very word that had tethered me to their expectations like an anchor disguised as care, and in that vulnerable instant, I delivered my culminating witty revenge laced with honesty that cut without cruelty. Safe has its place, Mom, but I have been charting skies on my own terms, and it turns out the view from Independence is clearer and more expansive than any ground-level warnings could have prepared me for, though I suppose a little faith might have earned you a window seat along the way. Laughter bubbled up through the tears, uneven but authentic, with Uncle Raoul raising his nearly empty wine glass in a booming toast to the surprises that kept family bonds tested, and True, his gravelly voice underscoring the moment with wisdom drawn from his own bootstrapped life. Yet the triumph twisted within me, laced with an unexpected hollowness, as my choices empowered one narrative while isolating another, leaving audiences to grapple with whether such clever retribution healed old wounds or merely scarred over them in solitude. As the evening wound toward its close, with hugs exchanged in the awkward warmth of newfound perspectives and dishes stacked haphazardly in the sink for later tending, Alex drew me onto the front porch where the November chill nipped at our skin, carrying the distant hum of traffic from the highway that symbolized paths diverging and reconverging in unexpected ways, his expression raw, with an admission that blurred the lines of rivalry into something more human. "I get the jealousy angle now, Elena. Or whatever drove the walls you built, but family means we could have toasted your wins together, lifted you up instead of letting doubts fester. Maybe I was too wrapped in my own chase to notice your ascent." His words humanized the golden child, revealing depths mounting like unspoken shadows and dreams fraying at the edges in ways that mirrored my secrecy, but without the armor of withheld truths, complicating the satisfaction of my revenge into a mirror reflecting our shared imperfections and the cost of assumptions on both sides. I nodded without full absolution, but with a tentative olive branch extended. "Perhaps next time around, if the asking comes from a place of real curiosity rather than comparison, we can share the skyline view without the storm clouds." And we parted with an embrace that felt fragile yet promising, the porch light flickering overhead as I made my way to the driveway where my unassuming sedan waited, engine humming to life beneath me, carrying me back toward the glowing city skyline that now represented not just achievement, but the unanswered questions lingering in the rearview. Chicago's lights blurred into streaks as I drove, the echoes of that dinner trailing like faint radio static, a reminder that truths unearthed in the heat of family feasts heal slowly, if at all, often leaving the future as ambiguous as the next holiday invitation. Pondering whether bridges rebuilt on the foundations of wit and withheld grace could withstand the winds of time, or if the solitude of soaring alone carried its own quiet victories and enduring costs.